We're back in Las Vegas, heading to the home of the WPT World Championship a few days before F1 weekend begins. Wynn has a bunch of cool exhibits on property to get people hyped up for the big event. Today we're here for poker though. I'm more hyped up about wrecking people's worlds on the felt. We're on the list for both 2-5 and 5-10. I get called for 2-5 first. We open up a new table. I buy in for $1,500 to start. That's the max. The session begins at 12:52 in the afternoon, short-handed. A few minutes in, we've got King-Jack offsuit in the small blind. Under the gun and the button both limp in for 5. I don't want to reopen the pot. I call for 3 more. The big blind checks this option. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes Queen 10-5 with 2 clubs. We've got an open-ended straight draw with 1 over and a backdoor flush draw. In a limp pot, most players are going to have low cards that don't connect well with this board. I bet 10 to win this without having to make a pair. We run into a roadblock immediately as the big blind raises to 30. This opponent is named Chuck. He saw a few people taking photos with me earlier and asked who I was. Now that he knows I'm a YouTuber, he's coming for me hard. Under the gun and the button fold, I call for 20 more. We're heads up. The turn is the 8 of clubs. It's an interesting card because we pick out the king high flush draw, but we could be drawing stone dead. I check. The big blind isn't worried about the flush draw getting there. He bets 50. I definitely can't fold now. I call to see if we can improve. The river is the 9 of spades, giving us the 6 card straight. I'm not sure if we have the winning hand. What I do know is that if I check, I'll be inclined to call a bet. I don't want to check and allow worse hands than ours to check back. Instead, I bet 110. Perhaps we can still get called by 2 pair hands, a set of 5s, or by Queen Jack. If we get raised, we can be reasonably certain that the opponent has a flush and our straight's no good. The big blind calls. We show him our straight, not being entirely sure that we've got the winner. Chuck is a little slow to let go of his cards. He mucks though. We get almost 200 from him. Now he wants something from us.
Let's take a picture.
Yep, do that. This is probably the first time someone's ever lost a pot to me and immediately asked for a photo. It's pretty funny considering 2 minutes ago he had no idea who I was, but I'm always happy to take pictures with anyone who's interested. It's kind of a fun moment to capture for the vlog. We get switched to the main game where we've got ace-king offsuit in the small blind. There are a couple people wanting to see a flop. Under the gun +2 limps in. A player in middle position raises to 20. Our hand has potential as well as removal to aces and kings. The price is going up. I 3-bet to 85. Under the gun +2 has been spending most of her life living in a limper's paradise, but she's not going to see a flop for $5. Our 3-bet doesn't intimidate her though. She calls for 80 more. I have absolutely no idea what to put her on when she limp calls $85 3-bets. Middle position player is literally willing to bet hundreds of dollars that I don't have a strong hand. He 4-bets to 305 to potentially steal what's in the middle. The middle position player started the hand with 1,000 total. Let's see if he really wants to play for all of it. I 5-bet rip it. The under the gun +2 limper can't believe it. She seems a little frazzled. I'm new at this table, but I get the sense that she's had a frustrating session and she's possibly tilting a bit. After some very impressive hand dancing, followed by a little shoulder movement, she checks her cards for about the 10th time, then she ultimately folds. The middle position player is a younger guy who's apparently very aggressive, at least in hands that I'm involved in. He shows a card that I wouldn't have expected him to 4-bet with. You have a 7? 7 is no good. I'm not sure what the middle position player actually had after showing the 7 of diamonds. He tells me that he had ace-7 suited and he was trying to make a move but got caught. Then I point out to him that I had the ace of diamonds, so no, he didn't have that. A few hands later, we've got 9-8 suited under the gun +2. This one's playable. I raised to 15. The button is the woman who limp called our 3-bet, then folded to the 5-bet shove. She calls with a shorter stack. I get the sense that she's even more on edge now than she appeared to be earlier. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes ace-10-8 with 2 clubs and a spade. We've got bottom pair and a backdoor straight draw. There's no need to get too wild. I check to hopefully get to showdown cheaply. The button's okay with that plan. She checks back. The turn is the 8 of spades, giving us the sneaky trips that we'll rarely have after raising pre-flop from pretty early position. I bet 25 for value. Out of nowhere, the opponent decides to rep a monster by raising to 75. She only has 534 total in her stack. She probably has some type of combo draw like Queen Jack of spades that she's now playing aggressively, or maybe she has ace-10 that she thought she was getting tricky with by checking back the flop. Given my read on her, I jam for 534 effective, expecting to get called by plenty of worse holdings.
There's a big chance I'm going to call.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping for. The fact that she didn't snap call indicates there's almost no chance that she has us beat. I'd love for her to call. She might just have ace-king or ace-queen she's unknowingly getting out of line with. That turns out not to be the case. She turns over king-8 offsuit, revealing that she somehow has me absolutely destroyed with trips and a better kicker. There's no way in hell she's going to fold trips. I definitely didn't put her on that. I thought maybe there's some chance she has ace-8 of diamonds, potentially 10-8 of diamonds or pocket 10s, but that's all I imagined we'd lose to. The button went way out of her way pre-flop, calling with king-8 offsuit, then gets a dream turn card to double up through me in a very unexpected way, and she appears to have a tough time making a decision for all of her chips. Surely she's going to call, right? Well, she's been thinking for almost a minute. She might be talking herself into a fold, thinking that I could have pocket aces or 10s. Finally, she makes the correct call.
You're good, we both have trips. You're in a very good situation. Nice hand, nice hand. How much is it?
The 4 diamonds on the river sealed the loss for us. We were up 550 early on, but in an instant, our profit gets swiped away and we're about even. Hands like this one don't bother me too much because trips over trips is a pretty big cooler. There's no time to dwell on anything. We pick out pocket kings the very next hand. We're under the gun +1. I raised to 15. The guy who 4-bet us earlier, then showed a 7, calls on the button. If his hand isn't good enough to at least 3-bet, he must have 6 high or worse. Small blind's a viewer, he calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. The dealer puts out 10-8-5 with 2 spades. We've got an overpair to the board. The small blind checks. Any card from a 4 to a queen that doesn't pair the board will complete at least 1 straight, plus we have to be worried about flush draws. I bet 25 for value and protection. Either opponent could reasonably have a set on this board. The button just calls, reducing the likelihood that he has 2 pair or better. The small blind puts in the check raise to 140 though. This isn't a fun spot to be in at all. Kings is too good to fold, but I definitely could be drawing slim, or even if I'm ahead, the opponent might have a massive draw with a hand like Jack-9 of spades. One thing that I feel better about is the fact that I don't have a spade in my hand, making it more likely that we could be up against a king-high flush draw. The main issue is that there are going to be very few turn cards that'll be good for us other than the king of hearts. If I lose back-to-back coolers, I guess I'm okay with it. We've got to get as much money in now as we can before our hand strength is downgraded. I re-raised to 400. Let's gamble. The button folds immediately. The small blind doesn't have a ton left on top of the 400. I imagine that he won't be calling very often. He should just be getting it in with sets and big draws for 855 more. Surprisingly, he calls the 400, leaving himself with under a pot-sized bet. Now I'm concerned that he just has a set of 10s and is trapping me with the nuts. The turn is the deuce of hearts. It's the second best card that we could have seen. The small blind checks. It seems like there's a good chance that we're up against top set, but if we're up against a big draw or ace-10, then we absolutely can't allow the opponent to see a free card. With effective stack sizes being small compared to the size of the pot, there's only one move to make. I jam for 855 effective. There's no fist pump snap call like I assume there might be. Quite the opposite's true. The opponent isn't sure whether or not to stick around. It feels like we're best, but I felt the same way with trip 8s one hand earlier until the opponent revealed that she had me totally dominated. The small blind calls the shove. We likely have a big sweat with lots of cards that we need to fade. I'm delighted to see the opponent turns over ace-10 offsuit. It's the best case scenario because we only need to avoid an ace or 10 on the river. The dealer puts out the 5 of diamonds, our kings are best, and we win a huge pot. Right after losing with trips in an all-in situation, we get everything back and way more to be up to a new high point on the session. The Cowboys get the commanding victory like it's week 1 at MetLife. I haven't had too many big wins in the last several vlogs, so I'm excited to be off to a great start today. We're already up 1,300 when we get called for the new 5-10 must-move game. I rack up 2,800. The 5-10 game is a 3K cap, but I'll be in for a discount. I add on for 200 more in order to have the max. I'm only in for 1,700 total on the day. The rest of what's in front of us is pure profit. Shortly into playing at the new table, we've got ace-6 of hearts in the cutoff. The under the gun player limps in. Usually, my open size is 3 times the big blind, but with the limper already in there, I increased the sizing to 40. There's no bounty on me that I'm aware of or anything, but the button, small blind, and under the gun all call. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes queen 4-4 with 2 clubs and a heart. Not all that exciting for us or seemingly anyone else. Everyone checks. The turn is the 9 of hearts, giving us a flush draw. It checks to us once again. I don't need to worry about the small blind or under the gun player having strong hands after they've checked twice with plenty of draws on the board and multiple opponents. The button probably won't have much either after being the last person to check on the flop. I make a small bet of 50. We didn't need to bet large to get weak hands like better aces or small to medium pocket pairs that are beating us to fold. The button folds. The small blind is likely a recreational player. He raises to 100. It's a min raise, probably to see where he's at with a 9 or weak queen. Under the gun folds. There's a tiny possibility the small blind could have made this raise with quads, pocket 9s, or queen 4, but I get the sense that he's doing this because 100 is the maximum amount of money that he's willing to invest, so he wants to either win this now or he's going to fold if he has to put any additional chips in. We're getting a great price, calling for only 50 more to try and drill a heart, or maybe an ace is fine. Instead, I re-raised to 350 to put a ton of pressure on the small blind. We're repping mostly full houses like queens full or nines full. The small blind's very confused. I'm a bit confused myself. I'm not really sure what hands he'd be min-raising with after a check through on the flop, and he checked again on the turn with no reason to believe that anyone behind him would be betting. My initial read on the situation might have been off because the small blind calls for 250 more. Now I'm concerned that he might have a monster, but he could still have some kind of draw that we're ahead of. The river's the ace of spades. We at least improved the top pair. We're beating pairs of queens, pairs of nines, and queen 9. The small blind checks. We've got showdown value and don't need to make this pot any bigger. I check back. The small blind shows that he flopped trips with 5-4 of spades and was playing possum. He's the winner. I got a little out of line, trying to make a move, and it doesn't work out. I lose several hundred more than necessary. We get switched to the main game and pick up queen jack of diamonds in the cutoff. The game is tough, so several people have taken breaks and are away from the table. I raise to 30. The button 3-bets to 100. He's someone who I have a very interesting history with. During my first stint as a professional poker player in 2012, I was having an extremely difficult time on the felt while I was living in LA. My expenses were high, my bankroll was low, and I was struggling in 510, mostly playing a commerce casino. The button, whose name is Casey Stewart, was a good, well-liked professional player out there who always wore a Dodgers hat. Anyway, during my third losing month in a row in Los Angeles, when I'd been running awful and playing bad because I was extremely stressed, I flopped a set of 9s on a Jack 9-7 rainbow flop. I got it all in against Casey, who flopped a straight with 10-8. Casey's straight held, and I remember being at the end of my rope after that exact hand, and I quit playing poker for a living. I've talked to Casey about it several times since then, and he's always been incredibly friendly, but it's one of those moments that I'll never forget. I call for 70 more to get some revenge that's been cooking up for over a decade. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes Jack 6-5 rainbow. We've got top pair with an okay kicker and a tricky situation to navigate. I check. The button isn't going to surrender. He bets 110 to keep the pressure on. We've got a lot going for us with a hand that could very easily be best. I call hoping that we get a check back from the opponent on the turn. The dealer puts out the 10 of hearts. It's a bad card because we're now losing to pocket 10s and Jack 10, which are combos we were ahead of on the previous street. I check to the pre-flop aggressor once again. There's still no letting up. In fact, this time he bets 250. I somewhat expected to see another bullet fired, whether the opponent has an overpair or a hand like a flush draw or ace-king or ace-queen that he's using to semi-bluff. This is the kind of scenario that could cause us to lose piles of money, where we've got a hand just strong enough to justify calling multiple streets, but we're up against a good player who's capable of getting max value out of an overpair. The good news is that we have removal to the nuts, and the button needs to be worried that we could have jiggities or pocket 10s. I call once more, not knowing what card we want to see on the river. The 3 of spades falls. It's a blank. I check. I'm relieved as Casey checks back immediately. We turn over our top pair. It's the best hand. The button mucks face down. We win the pot. It's nice to take this one down after semi-bluffing and losing a few hundred earlier on with ace-6 of hearts. It isn't too fun being out of position in a 3-bet pot against the best player at the table. Luckily, it works out for us. Next, we've got ace-queen suited on the button. Under the gun raises to 30. Under the gun +1 calls. The cutoff calls. This hand isn't terrible to go multi-way with since we're suited. If we make a straight or flush, we'd have multiple players who could potentially pay us off. I try to narrow down the amount of opponents we'll have though. I 3-bet to 160. Casey's given me PTSD as he cold 4-bets to 480 from the small blind. Under the gun +1, and the cutoff all fold. The action's back on us. We're playing deep against an opponent who could definitely be 4-betting light, especially since the situation was set up nicely for us to go for a big squeeze, and Casey knows that. I know that he knows that. I call for 320 more in position. There's over $1,000 in the middle, and we're about to go to battle heads up. The flop comes King 8-3 rainbow. We brick it. All we have going for us is the possibility of hitting a backdoor straight or flush. We could be drawing incredibly slim if we're up against pocket kings or ace king, which will make up a decent portion of the opponent's range. The small blind significantly down bets at 210. It's about 20% of the pot. Is he milking me? Maybe he is. There's still a lot of cards that'll help us improve on the turn though. I can't fold while we're in position and getting great pot offs. I call looking for a club. The turn is the queen of spades giving us second pair. Now we at least beat hands like jacks and tens. The small blind checks. We can have some strong hands on this board like ace king, pocket queens, and maybe even kings. My worry about checking back is that it'll essentially turn our hand face up. Then the small blind can bomb rivers to put us to a really tough decision with only second pair. I bet 400 to take control of the pot in order to check back all rivers and ensure that we get to showdown relatively cheaply. The small blind folds pretty quickly. It's possible that he had jacks, tens, or a small ace-x suited hand. It's a big pot, so it's a good result for us to win it without having to risk too much on the turn. Remember, we're only in for 1700 today, so this pot gets our profit over 2100 on the session. Here we've got ace-king offsuit under the gun +1 with a straddle on. The whole table agreed to do a round of straddles, which tends to lead to straddles being on 100% of the time, even beyond the one round. I raised to 50. There's a viewer in middle position. He calls. The under the gun straddler is usually a regular at Bellagio, but he's made his way over to the win today and he's not messing around. He 3-bets to 300 with about 1250 total in his stack. It is incredibly disrespectful over our early position raise. I'm willing to get it in against him, but I can't shove because we have a lot in our stack and the middle position player has us covered. I 4-bet to 750 just in case the middle position player is trapping with aces. If the middle position player really has a hand that he didn't want to 3-bet with himself, he'll fold to our 4-bet and we can isolate the under the gun straddler. The middle position player folds. The under the gun player doesn't have all that strong of a hand after all. He was trying to make a move. He folds as well. The dealer takes $200 from our 4-bet to give change to the under the gun player who 3-bet to 300 with a purple $500 chip. We acquire our first grape chip of the day. We've got almost 4,200 in our stack. We're up about 2,500 already. Later we're dealt Jack-9 suited in the small blind. The straddle will be on for every hand from this point forward. If the hijack limps in for 20, it's a good sign when we see that happening at a table because really good players don't typically open limp in cash games. I call for 15 more. The big blind calls and the under the gun straddler checks. We're going 4 ways to the flop out of position. It comes 8-6-5 with 2 spades and a heart. We've got a gut shot straight draw, 2 overs, and a backdoor flush draw. I take a stab betting 40. It's a strong play betting into 3 opponents, but it's a board that'll normally connect well with our range. We have a blocker to the nuts, and there are a lot of cards that can help us on future streets if we don't take it down right now. The big blind calls. This is Casey, the player who 11 years ago sent me back to pursue a career in accounting. Under the gun and the hijack fold, it's down to heads up. The turn is the queen of hearts. It's an amazing card that gives us a flush draw and a double gutter because an offsuit 10 will now give us the nuts. There's 160 in the pot. I'm going to continue repping the straight or other strong but vulnerable hands with so many draws out there. I bet 200. It's more than the pot. Casey isn't remotely bothered by our big bet. We can't push him around. He raises to 750. Well, damn. We were looking to take this one down without necessarily having to get there. Casey might have the straight. He could have 2 pair or a set, or he could have some sort of big draw himself. If he does have a hand like ace-4 of spades, I'm 100% certain that we're going to win this pot. About 38% of the time. We've got 4,200 total in our stack. I still don't want to call and have to actually make a hand. With such a strong draw and so much already in the middle, I'm okay taking a massive risk as a semi-bluff.
All in.
A re-raise shove for piles. Casey and I have 2 of the largest stacks at the table. He doesn't snap call, so he doesn't have the nuts, and he doesn't like seeing the jam. He goes into the tank longer than my career as a CPA lasted. Just under a minute later, he folds.
We got that one too, Casey. We got that one.
Casey has a great attitude and takes it like a champion. I never find out what he folded, but we make a lot of money with only potential. Stack climbs to 5,000. We're up 3,300 with a lot of profit to play with. We want more though. We run cold for a while before picking up king-jack offsuit and the under the gun straddle. The hijack raises to 50. The button, small blind, and big blind call. I call for 30 more to close the action. We're going 5 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out ace, queen, deuce, rainbow. We just have a gutter. All players check. The turn is the 10 of spades, giving us Broadway. It's even sweeter because there's no flush draw to worry about. It's a rainbow board. The small blind bets 180. The big blind folds. We could raise, but we're in position on the small blind and have a few players behind us that we wouldn't mind seeing a call or raise from. I generally don't trap with straights. I make an exception in this instance with a call because we're going to have the nuts as long as the board doesn't pair on the river. The hijack and button fold. It's down to heads up. The river's the 4 of hearts. It's a total blank. If the opponent was strong enough on the turn to bet into 4 players, he should be strong enough to bet again here. The small blind unexpectedly checks. Very few hands improve on this river, and our hand strength is concealed. I overbet 800 in a spot that should look more suspect than the fact that Ray Lewis doesn't know where his cream-colored suit is. I'll rarely have straights or sets, and there aren't a ton of 2-pair combos that I'll have that I'd be overbetting with. Unfortunately, the small blind was still with the must move when I pulled off the 3-bet jam as a semi-bluff for over 4,000 with Jack-9 suited, because that play would certainly help me get paid off in this situation if he'd seen it. After about a minute and a half, the opponent folds. It was teed up for us. We went for the home run. It doesn't pay off like we hoped. It's still a decent pot with all the money in pre-flop and the bet on the turn. We go on another cold streak for about 2 hours before we pick up 8-7 offsuit in the under the gun straddle. Casey raises a 60 from under the gun +1. He's done really well for himself today, running up a big stack despite us getting the wins in the larger pots that we've played head to head. The small blind calls. We're closing the action. I call for 40 more. 3 of us are still in it. The flop comes 9-9-6 with 2 hearts. We've got an open ender and a backdoor flush draw. The small blind checks. I checked the pre-flop aggressor. He bets 130. The small blind folds. On a paired board, I could make an argument for folding because we could already be drawing slim. If we're up against pocket 10s or 5s, we could lose a lot of money if we improve to a straight. I like to live on the edge, and I call one time anyway. The turn is the 10 of spades, giving us 5 in a row. I check to see what the opponent wants to do. He checks back. I doubt he'd do that with a full house. We should have the best hand. The river's the deuce of diamonds. It's a total blank. I love seeing it. Casey has certainly seen me overbet bluff before. I bet 700 to make it look like I'm trying to steal it with a missed heart draw after seeing weakness with a check back from the opponent on the turn. If he has 2 high cards, he won't be calling a bet anyway. I'm just targeting his overpairs that he might have checked back the turn with for pot control and potentially some hands containing 10s that he might have. Casey's in the blender. It's clear that he has something better than a high card hand. Eventually he folds, letting me know that he can always see it on the vlog. I tell him that it's a good fold and I had a straight. He says he's surprised because he had 10-8 of clubs. It's a combination that's theoretically probably a call since he blocks 10-9, 9-8, and 8-7. He does well to get away from it without paying us off. Here we pick up King-Queen suited in the cutoff. I raised to 50. It's time for Casey to get a little revenge of his own. He 3-bets to 200 from the button. We're playing relatively deep with a hand that can make the nuts in a few different ways. I call for 150 more. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes King 4-3 with 2 hearts and a diamond. We've got top pair with a good kicker and a backdoor flush draw. I check. The main hands I'm concerned about being up against are aces and ace-king. There's only one combo of pocket kings possible, so that's not very likely. The opponent bets 230. It's a bit more than half pot. I'm more than happy to pay that amount. I call. Let's get a low black card or a queen, please. The dealer puts out the ace of hearts instead. Since the ace of hearts is accounted for, there aren't as many plausible flushes the opponent will have after 3-betting us pre-flop, but it's still an awful card because there are a ton of ace-x combos that he might have 3-bet us with pre-flop that we're in bad shape against. I check. Casey checks back, so he might have a pocket queens, jacks, 10s, or 9s type of hand that we're beating. He'd also have small suited aces though. The river's the 4 of spades. It's basically a blank given the action. I consider putting out a small blocker bet that might induce a call from queens or jacks. Instead, I check. I'm glad I chose to do that because the button checks back. We get to showdown with second pair. It's no good. Casey wins with ace-queen offsuit, drilling the 3-outer on the turn to get some money back from us. This is a good time to plug his wife's massive Instagram account, the Las Vegas Foodie. She's got over 450,000 followers. If you're ever in Vegas looking for a good new restaurant to check out, she does an amazing job highlighting all the unique, trendy locations. My girlfriend has actually been a follower of hers for years, not knowing that Casey and I knew each other, or that he made me move back in with my parents. In this one, we're dealt ace-10 offsuit in the under the gun straddle. Casey raises a 60 from under the gun +1. The cutoff calls. He's a viewer named Blake who just got into the main game. He saw me playing hours ago and came over to me at the table to tell me that he's a big fan. I'm glad that we're getting the chance to play together while I kill some time before my dinner reservations with my girlfriend. Small blind calls. I call for 40 more to close the action. We're going 4 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out Queen 5-4 with 2 spades and a diamond. We've got nothing except an over and some backdoor draws. We all check. The turn is the King of Diamonds, giving us a gut shot straight draw. Everyone checks again. The river is the 6 of Diamonds, putting 3 diamonds on the board. We have the blocker to the nuts. Small blind checks. I don't think that we'd be able to win this at showdown with only ace high and 3 opponents to beat. I rep the nuts, betting 230. It's another large sizing, like I've used when we've had really strong hands. Under the gun +1 folds. The cutoff Blake isn't so sure that we've got what we're representing. I get the sense that he wants to make the vlog, so he could be contemplating calling very light. Ultimately he folds. There's no way the small blind has anything after checking 3 times, but he really doesn't believe me. He calls. We turn over the bluff. The opponent wrecks my world with pocket 3s. I get owned. I'm shocked, not thrilled to lose a couple hundred at the end there. I haven't won any significant hands in a while. The stack is going the wrong direction. I'm still up 1900 on the day, but I'm ready to wrap the session up and go to dinner. It's just not quite time. We've been playing for about 7 hours when we pick up ace queen offsuit in the big blind. The viewer Blake is on the button and raises to 60. I typically I'd 3-bet in this spot, but there are a few reasons I don't feel like doing that. One is that I get the sense Blake might go out of his way to bluff me to make the vlog, so if I show up with a hand that he doesn't expect me to have and I make top pair or 2 pair or better, I might be able to make a lot of money from him. Also, I'm not in the mood to play as big of a pot at the moment. I'm getting tired and I definitely want to make sure that we have a 4-figure win so that I can enjoy dinner more. I'm already down about 1500 from the high point. I just call for 50 more to keep things more manageable. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes Queen 8-6 with 2 hearts. We've got a sneaky top. This is the exact situation that I was hoping for against a viewer. I check. He doesn't go with a bluff attempt after all. He just checks back. That's disappointing. He probably doesn't have a flush draw. Maybe he just has ace high. The turn is the ace of hearts, giving us top 2 pair. The flush draw gets there, but I'm really not worried about it after seeing a check back from the opponent on the flop, and since it's the ace of hearts that completes the flush, there are fewer flush combos to be worried about the button having. I check to see a likely bet if he has something like ace king, ace jack, or maybe he'll even do it as a bluff with king jack, whether he has a heart in his hand or not. The button bets 40. It looks pretty weak, like he's got 1 pair just to draw. I raised to 200 for value. I could see it in the opponent's eyes that he wanted to call me light when we were bluffing with ace-10 offsuit, and he told the entire table after the hand that he was best. It seemed like he wanted redemption, and it should appear as if I'm bluffing again here. The button calls. If we get a blank, we'll be set up well to get a lot of value. The river is the 9 of spades, allowing jack-10 to make a straight, which would have been a gutter on the flop and a double gutter on the turn. I'm not worried about that hand improving since the opponent probably would have bet on the flop with it and might have bet more on the turn with a double gutter. We've got the green light to bet big for value. I bet 500, really hoping that the opponent has an ace, potentially ace king with the king of hearts. There's a good chance that he could have king jack or king 10 with 1 heart as well. Even though he checked back the flop and just called our check raise on the turn, he comes out of left field with a raise to 1350 as if the offsuit 9 somehow helped him. This doesn't make any sense. I mentioned earlier that I got the feeling he'd try to make the vlog. Against viewers, I normally have to bluff less and call lighter, particularly when the story doesn't add up. King jack and king 10 with 1 heart is the perfect candidate to turn into a bluff on the river. I call expecting to win. Blake owns my soul, getting maximum value out of me with queen 9 of hearts. He got the perfect turn card to win a huge pot from me. He probably would have called a 3-bet from me pre-flop and might have won even more money if we went the more aggressive route, but I'm still annoyed because after being up a couple thousand for almost the entire session, I lose big at the end to barely be up at all. If this turned into a losing session, I'd be on mega tilt. I'm happy for the viewer to win big and have a positive memory that'll be documented on YouTube forever, but I'm also annoyed for my own sake. Even though dinner isn't for another hour and a half, I know that I won't be able to play my best, and I'd still like to leave here a winner after being here all day. It's time to rack up. Played for 7 hours. I won $310, kind of a frustrating session for me. I was up 3,300 at the high points. Played in a lot of big hands, so that part was cool. But to lose a big chunk at the end against the guy Blake, who's a viewer, when I thought things were set up for me to pick off a big bluff was pretty frustrating, just being up the entire day pretty much, and then right there at the end lose, you know, what is it, I don't know, 85% of my profit basically. So little annoying, but that's poker. It happens. I kind of needed, you know, I lost $10,000 of my own money in Jacksonville playing those 5K bullets. So I wanted to get a big chunk back today. Haven't had any really big wins, especially when I've been filming recently. A lot of just small wins. So hopefully something will turn around. Maybe I'll get some big wins coming up during the World Championship that'll be here. So we'll see, but still more stuff to do on property tonight. I've got my girlfriend coming and we're gonna go grab a nice dinner at Delilah. Basically just enough to cover that meal. Maybe not quite enough. To kill some time, I watched the lake show on the wind side that not many people know about, even a lot of locals. In my opinion, it's the second best free show in Las Vegas. Be sure to check it out if you're ever in town. My girlfriend and I call an audible to go to Herbs and Rye off the strip rather than Delilah's, because Delilah's doesn't allow backpacks or filming, which partly defeats the purpose of me spending extra money on a meal to show you guys everything that they have to offer. That's okay, because Herbs and Rye is my favorite steakhouse in the city anyway. They're open late and have amazing cocktails and food. I didn't win as much as I would have liked, but it's still nice to leave the casino with a couple hundred more than I walked in with. It's a great way to celebrate not only winning earlier, but also the fact that today I reached 700,000 subscribers.
Yeah! Yes!
Woo! It's a big milestone. It's always been a goal of mine to get to 1 million though. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Thanks to everyone who's been following along the journey for the last 7 years. It's been life-changing, and I appreciate all your guys' support through the ups and the downs. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. A couple things I want to talk about. One is I want to give a shout out to Casey Stewart, who is the opponent in this episode, who I mentioned won a huge hand against me that was really the straw that broke the camel's back for my first stint as a professional poker player back in 2012. I still remember it. I was in Los Angeles living there with my brother, and I was playing 5-10 at Commerce pretty much every day, and it wasn't going particularly well. After a couple months of really running bad, that was kind of causing me to play worse and being underrolled for those games, making kind of every mistake you can make in the book when you first start out playing. I got into this hand with Casey and I had pocket nines on a Jack 9-7 flop. So we got middle set and Casey had 10-8 suited for a straight. We got it all in. His hand held, and I just remember just being completely dejected and not wanting to play poker for a living anymore after just an absolutely brutal few months. And so that's kind of what caused me to go back. I had to move back into my parents' house at 25 and or 24 and basically restart my life. It was a very, very low point for me. And there's just so much that happened in my poker career before I started doing the YouTube channel. And I feel like there's a responsibility that I have to talk about those rough times before I got to this point and poker, you know, started working out for me. It really was not glamorous for several years, and it was just brutal mentally, and it's not a lifestyle that I recommend for a lot of reasons. And I just think that I kind of have to say that for the younger viewers who are just watching these videos thinking that I just decided to wake up and play poker for a living and now things are going well. That was certainly not always the case, and I put in a ton of effort studying these books that you see behind me and training sites and just going through rough patches and battling with all that stuff. Anyway, I do want to say that if you've been following along on my Instagram, there have been some some awesome tournament results for me lately for the WPT World Championship in December, and I can't wait to share those videos with you. I have so much footage saved up from this month that I need to make vlogs out of. It's a little bit overwhelming for me to think about, but I can't wait until I get those videos out. I had some huge scores and just some really big personal achievements that I'm excited to share with you. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you had a great Christmas. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.